Welcome back to our special coverage of the presidential inauguration. At this hour, President Trump is wrapping lunch with family, lawmakers, and other dignitaries before heading over to speak to supporters waiting for him at Capital One Arena.
Rashad Hudson is live near the Capitol now with a look at how this day is unfolding in an unusual way, no doubt, Rashad, just by virtue of the weather in D.C.
Hi there from a very cold Washington, D.C., and it is those cold temperatures that have downsized this inauguration. Now, we were expecting the streets here behind me to be bustling with people, but because of those cold temperatures, things were scaled down, and some of those supporters were able to go inside of the Capital One Arena. That's where the basketball team and the hockey team here in Washington, D.C., that's where they play. But today it was turned into a viewing party for those wanting to see the inauguration ceremony. Many people traveled from all over the country wanting to see the president get sworn in. They had to do so inside because of the cold weather. Now, the Trump team is debunking the theory that the inauguration was held indoors because of threats and security concerns. The Trump administration says that is not true. They say that that inauguration ceremony was moved indoors or because of the bitter cold here in Washington, D.C. And on the topic of security, if you walk around the Capitol complex, there is dozens and dozens of law enforcement officers here in the nation's capital to keep everyone safe, even though things were scaled down and there weren't people outside watching the inauguration. Several states sent National Guard members here to also act as security, and there's fencing and barricades and armored vehicles surrounding the Capitol, making sure that everything went smooth today because this is a very high security event. Now, back out here near the Capitol, like you mentioned, President Trump will make his way over to Capital One Arena to greet supporters and to watch that indoor parade that's going to take place there, because there were a lot of people that traveled to be a part of that parade. It's been scaled down, but there'll still be some activity going in to the Capital One Arena where people will be there to watch. And then later, the president will take part in several inaugural balls throughout the city here in D.C.
All right, Rashad Hudson, thank you.
And joining us now are two local Republicans with reaction to the inauguration of President Donald Trump. Greg Hart is a Republican and former DuPage County board member.
And Sean Morrison is chairman of the Cook County Republican Party and the only Republican serving on the Cook County Board of Commissioners. Gentlemen, thank you. We appreciate your perspective. All right, so we've talked about deportation. We have talked about a number of issues. What do you think is the issue that will resonate most? Because we keep seeing, I think, the shiny objects, right? Elon Musk jumping up and down on stage and the threat of mass deportations in Chicago. What will the barometers of a good start to the Trump presidency be? Let's start with you, Sean.
That's a great question. I think the barometers of a good start will be issues that are going to really affect the pocketbooks of the individual family. Right? And because at the end of the day, all politics become local, and there's nothing more local than your own household and what it costs you to run that household. So if he comes right out of the box and puts the regulations back into place that will allow for energy to be produced, whether that's fossil fuel or whether that's others, natural gas, whether he starts to open up some more of the pipelines to where we can bring energy costs down sooner rather than later, I think that'll have a dramatic impact. They have thrown some policies out there as it pertains to housing. I think housing is another big issue across the board throughout the whole country. I think if he can come out and have some immediate impact on those within the first 30 to 90 days, I think that will certainly get him off and running.
Okay,
One thing he did say he would do today on day one is sign some tariffs into place. Yep. So what's the economic impact of tariffs? Because a lot of people think the tariffs mean that China, Mexico, they're going to be paying more money, and that's not how tariffs work.
Well, tariffs work globally. You're right. It's not just only this country here I'm going to do something for. If you have a categorical product, the tariff to bring that product here is going to be the same across the board. Tariffs is a very controversial issue. There's a lot of economists that say they're bad, and then on the flip side, you have many that say they're good. Now, when Trump was in term last time, everybody screamed that tariffs were going to be bad. But towards the end of his administration, you started to see that the revenue that was coming in was significantly growing. We can't deny that. There was increased revenue. That
Coming in from where? I mean, the revenue, tariff does. China's not paying the tariff. We're paying the tariff.
But of course, like right now, as you're aware, the amount of products that are coming into the U.S. have nearly more than tripled than when Donald Trump has left office. And that's a significant difference from a financial scale because, it all talks about balance. When Donald Trump talks about tariffs, he's talking about the balancing and the fair equity of our products going out to the world versus what comes in and what that value, Paul, is that's paid for those products. That's where you're leveling up. It's not tax. It's not those. But that revenue does a few things. It has more products created here to go out to the world, which means what? Which means more jobs, which eventually does mean more taxes.
But Sean, just to clarify, the tariff itself is paid by the importer. That is to say, if China sends something here, it's the person at the border who's waiting for it to get off the boat. That's who's got to pay the tariff, and then that person has to decide whether they transfer it down, or they might not. They might say, no, I'll eat this and let it eat into my profits.
They
but
will.
not if it's a 50% tariff or something like that. I mean, that's hard for business.
One thing I do want to say is, we talk a lot about how each of these policies are going to be perceived tactically and literally. The people that put Donald Trump in the White House, they don't care so much about the lyrics. They care about the song as a whole. I don't think they're going to be looking specifically at the outcomes. They're going to be seeing a focus from Donald Trump on how it affects their lives. I do think that he will be held to some standard, especially when the midterms come up. But that's why I think you're going to be seeing Donald Trump focus on the executive actions where he can show data that moves in the right direction.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, no. I was just to follow on that. Yeah. What are the data points that people will be looking at? Because we already talked about, inflation, you're not going to be able to bring down the cost of eggs in a week and two in a month.
Right.
So what are interest rates? Is that something that comes down? Where does he show that, look, your pocketbook is doing a lot better today than it was
because
a year ago?
inflation rates are already low, so it's not
even
bad.
As we all know, even with interest rates, that's really the Fed that sets that policy. As much as we may laugh about DOGE and the Department of Government Efficiency, that is a serious problem, government bloat that people, all Americans know is real. And by having someone with a high profile like Elon Musk assuming that responsibility and actually making direct impacts on that over the next couple of weeks, Trump will be able to say, I've saved you in my first month as president X amount of billions of dollars just by cutting waste internally.
But that X is changing, Greg, because Elon Musk, who promised $2 trillion already, has said, well, we might be able to get closer to $1 trillion. So he's seeing that in a federal budget, so much of it is predetermined. There isn't that much spending room. And let me just add one more point for you to respond, which is, remember that one of the things President Trump wanted was for the Congress to suspend the debt ceiling throughout his whole term. Those would not be the words of somebody who's planning to reduce spending. They would be the words of somebody who is planning to expand spending.
Well, and I think we all have lived through 10 years of Donald Trump, and we know that what is said today may evolve over the next couple weeks and months and years. But I think the point of shining a light on that issue, that's not going to be unnoticed by the American people, especially when you have someone with such a high profile leading that effort.